Jia pulled her thin jacket tighter as she stepped off the transport ship. Cold air hit her face. The huge dome of the Galactic Academy of Sciences stood tall against the purple sky of Nexus Prime. Her heart beat fast in her chest. "Move along, human," said a tall blue alien with 4 arms. He wore the silver uniform of a port officer. "Your processing is in Building C." Jia nodded and picked up her small bag. She kept her eyes down as she walked. All around her, aliens of many kinds moved quickly. Some had scales, others had fur. Some floated instead of walking. None were human. At Building C, a thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes looked at her papers. His long fingers tapped on a screen. "Jia from Earth Colony TR7, he said. His voice sounded like metal scraping. "You are the only human in this year's class. Interesting." Jia said nothing. She knew why she was interesting. Humans were rare now. After the Great War, few remained. "Administrator Kellner will see you now," the gray alien said. The office was large with windows that showed the 3 moons of Nexus Prime. Administrator Kellner sat behind a floating desk. He had orange skin and a ridge of small horns on his head. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair. Jia sat down. Her hands shook a little. She hid them in her lap. "You understand," Kellner said, "that this academy trains the brightest minds in the galaxy. Our courses are designed for species with advanced brains. Humans have limitations." "I passed the entrance exams," Jia said quietly. Kellner made a sound like a laugh. "Yes, quite surprising. We shall see how long you last." He pressed a button. "Your room is in Tower 4. Your roommate is Talia of the Luminar. Classes begin tomorrow." Jia found Tower 4 after getting lost twice. The academy was huge, with buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. Her room was small but clean. Talia was already there. The Luminar girl had pale blue skin that glowed softly. Her hair looked like white silk. She glanced at Jia and turned away without speaking. "Hello," Jia said. "I'm Jia." Talia's voice was cold. "I know who you are. The human experiment. Keep to your side of the room." Jia unpacked her few things. Under her clothes was a small metal box. She opened it carefully when Talia wasn't looking. Inside was a pendant on a chain. It was old and made of a strange metal that seemed to change color in the light. Jia touched it gently, then hid it again. The next morning, Jia went to orientation. The great hall was filled with students from 100 worlds. They sat in groups, talking and laughing. No one invited Jia to join them. "Look at that," she heard someone say. "A primitive human. I thought they were almost extinct. Why let one study here? They can barely understand basic physics," another voice said. Jia sat alone and listened to the speeches. She wrote down her class schedule. First was quantum physics with Professor Vrex. The classroom was a large circle with seats rising up like stairs. Jia found a spot in the back. Professor Vrex was tall and thin, with 6 eyes that blinked one after another. "We begin with the basics of quantum probability," he said. Then he stopped and pointed at Jia. "You, human, what is your name?" The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at her. "Jia, sir." "Tell me, Jia, why should a human study advanced sciences? Your species barely managed space travel before nearly destroying yourselves." Jia felt her face get hot. She wanted to disappear, but deep inside, something strong made her answer. "To learn, sir, and to remember." "Remember what?" Vrex asked. Jia looked at him directly. "Everything." Professor Vrex stared at her for a long moment. Some students laughed. Others looked confused. Vrex finally turned away. "Page 42, he said. "The quantum binding theory." Jia opened her book. Her hand touched her side where the pendant was hidden under her uniform. It felt warm, like it was alive, like it was waiting for something. 2 months passed. Jia never missed a class. She woke up early every day before Talia. She stayed late in the library every night. after most students left. Still, no one talked to her much. She ate alone. She studied alone. Except for Da. Dae worked in the academy's gardens. He was a Korean like Jia, but he had been born on a different colony. He had kind eyes and a quick smile. These plants need water twice a day, Dad told her, showing her a blue flower with 5 stems. They're from the water moons of Talax. Jia liked the gardens. They were quiet, peaceful. Dae never asked why she came there so often. He just talked about plants and sometimes shared his lunch with her. "You're doing well in classes?" he asked one day. Jia nodded. "I study a lot." What she didn't say was that she had to. The others were naturally smarter, with bigger brains or 2 brains or special memory glands. She was just human, just Jia. Today was different. Today was combat training with Commanders all. All academy students had to learn basic fighting. Even scientists needed to protect themselves in the dangerous parts of the galaxy. The training room was big, with soft mats on the floor. Commander Zal was from a warrior race. His skin was dark red and hard like armor. Scars crossed his face. "Pair up," he ordered. His voice was like rocks falling. "Today we practiced throws." Students quickly found partners. No one chose Jia. She stood alone, looking at the floor. "What is this?" Commander Zal walked over. "No partner for the human. Krell, you will work with her." Jia looked up. Krell was the biggest student in class. He came from the Drachner, a species known for fighting. He had scales instead of skin and stood 2 heads taller than Jia. "But Commander," Krell said, "she is too small. I might break her." Some students laughed. Jia felt her face get hot. "Then be careful," Commander Zal said. "Now begin. Show the basic throw I taught last week." Jia and Krell faced each other on the mat. Krell smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Don't worry, little human," he said. "I won't throw you too hard." Jia took a deep breath. She moved her feet into position and raised her hands. Commander Zal was watching her closely. Something in how she stood made his eyes narrow. "Begin," he said. Krell moved fast for someone so big. His hand grabbed Jia's arm. He pulled and turned, using her weight against her. Jia felt herself lifted. Then she was falling. She hit the mat hard. Pain shot through her back. She wanted to stay down, but made herself get up. "Again," Commander Zal said. Again Krell threw her. And again. And again. Each time, Jia got up slower than before. "Enough," Commander Zal finally said. "Next pair." Jia limped to the side of the room. Her body hurt all over. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. After class, she went back to her room. Talia wasn't there. Jia locked the door and sat on her bed. Only then did she let herself cry. Her hand went to her chest, where the pendant hung hidden under her shirt. It was warm to the touch, like always. She pulled it out and looked at it. The strange metal seemed to move and shift colors, even though she knew that was impossible. "I can't do this," she whispered to the pendant. "I'm not strong enough. Not smart enough." The pendant pulsed once with a soft light, as if answering her. Jia wiped her tears and put the pendant away. She took out her study tablet and began reading about quantum physics. She had a test tomorrow. She would not fail. She could not fail. Outside her window, the 3 moons of Nexus Prime rose in the purple sky. In the gardens below, Dad looked up at her window before going back to watering the blue flowers from Talax. And in the combat training room, Commander Zal watched the recording of Jia's fighting stance again and again, his eyes narrow and thoughtful. Late at night, when most students were sleeping, the academy was quiet. Security cameras watched empty halls. Then a small figure moved through the shadows. It was Jia. She reached the training room and stopped. She looked around, then took out a small device. She pointed it at the camera in the corner. The red light on the camera went off. Jia walked to the center of the room. She took off her jacket. Under it, she wore a simple black training suit. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she began to move. Her movements were not like in class. They were fast, smooth, perfect. She punched and kicked the air. She spun and jumped. She moved like water, like wind, not like a clumsy human girl at all. For an hour she practiced. Then she fixed the camera and left as quietly as she came. The next morning, students gathered around the scoreboard. Test results from Professor Vrex's class were posted. A name at the top made everyone stare. Gia, the human. Someone said, "That's not possible." But there it was. Gia had scored in the top 5%. In class, Professor Vrex was angry. His 6 eyes all blinked at once when he saw Gia. "You," he said, pointing at her, "see me after class." Gia's stomach felt tight. She nodded. After class, Professor Vrex stood in front of her desk. "How did you cheat, human?" he asked. "I didn't cheat, sir," Gia said. "I studied." "Impossible. Humans can't understand quantum theory at this level." "I just work hard, sir." Professor Vrex made an angry sound. "I'm watching you. One mistake, and you're out." Gia walked to her next class with her head down. She didn't see Han until she bumped into him. "Sorry," she said. Han was a Korean student like her and Da, but he was studying ancient history. He smiled at her. "It's okay. You're Gia, right? The one who scored so high on Vrex's test. That's amazing." Gia didn't know what to say. No one besides Da had said anything nice to her before. "Thanks," she said. "We have advanced energy systems together next," Han said. "Want to walk together?" In class, they had to do an experiment with energy crystals. Han was Gia's partner. They set up the equipment together. "Activate the main crystal," said the teacher. Gia reached for the crystal. When her hand got close, her pendant grew warm under her shirt. The crystal glowed brighter than it should. "That's strange," Han said. He looked at some readings on a screen. "I'm getting weird energy patterns." He looked at Gia closely. "Is that a pendant under your shirt? It might be affecting the crystal." Gia stepped back quickly. "No, it's nothing." The crystal went back to normal. Han looked like he wanted to ask more questions, but the teacher came over. After class, Gia hurried away. She didn't see Han watching her. She didn't see him pick up something she had dropped. It was a small data chip. That night, Han looked at the chip in his room. He put it in his computer. Most of the files were locked, but he could open one. The file title made him sit up straight. "The Last Stand of Earth." He began to read. The file talked about a great war from 200 years ago. It mentioned something called the Void Armada and a final battle on Earth. Han didn't finish reading. Someone knocked on his door. It was Da. "Have you seen Gia?" Da asked. "She missed our meeting in the garden." Han shook his head. "No, but I found something she dropped. Something strange." He showed Da the file. Da's eyes grew wide as he read. "We need to find her," Daz said. "Now." At that moment, in the combat training room, Commander Zoll was watching Gia. He had fixed the security camera. He had seen her secret practice, and he had called Administrator Kellner. "Watch," Commander Zoll said, showing the recording. "No human moves like that." Administrator Kellner's eyes narrowed. "What is she hiding?" "I don't know," said Commander Zoll. "But I will find out." Han worked all night on the data chip. Most files were still locked, but he found more about the war from 200 years ago. "The Void Armada," he read. "A fleet of warships that almost took over the galaxy." He looked at the pictures. Black ships shaped like sharp claws. Scary aliens with 4 eyes and teeth like knives. "They attacked many worlds," the file said. "No one could stop them." Han kept reading. Then they reached Earth, a small blue planet with only one moon, home of humans. The next part made Han sit up straight. The Void Armada lost only one battle, on Earth. After that, they disappeared. No one knows why. Han called Da on his room screen. You need to see this. Later, they met in the garden. Da looked worried. I can't find Ja anywhere, he said. She's not in her room. Talia said she left early. Look at this. Han showed Da what he found. Earth was the only planet that beat the Void Armée. Then Earth was closed off. No one allowed in or out. And Jia is from an Earth colony, Da said slowly. This can't be just chance. The academy bell rang. They had to go to class. In the hallway, they finally saw Jia. She looked tired. When she saw them, she tried to walk away. Jia, wait. Han called. We found your data chip. Jia stopped. Her face went pale. Give it back. We need to talk, Daz said. About Earth. About the Void Armada. I don't know what you mean, Jia said. I'm late for class. Jia, Han said quietly. What's a human orphan doing with secret files about Earth's last battle? Jia looked at them for a long moment. Meet me after class. In the garden. I'll explain. But they never got to meet. That day, Commander Zal announced the surprise combat test. Everyone to the training room, he said. Now, in the training room, large metal training robots waited. They were for advanced students only. They could really hurt someone. Today we test your reaction speed, Commander Zal said. The robots will throw objects. You must dodge them. Students lined up. One by one, they faced the robots. Some did well. Others got hit by the softballs the robots threw. Then it was Jia's turn. Level 5, Commander Zal said to the robot. That was the highest level. Too fast for beginners. Jia stepped forward. Han and Da watched nervously from the side. The robot began throwing balls. Fast, very fast. Jia dodged the first few. Then Commander Zal pressed a button. The robot switched to metal discs instead of softballs. This was against the rules. Metal discs could cut skin. Stop, shouted a student named Leia. That's dangerous. Leia stepped forward, right as the robot threw a disc. It flew at her head. What happened next made everyone gasp. Jia moved faster than any human should be able to move. She jumped between Leia and the disc. She caught it in midair. The disc cut her hand, but she didn't drop it. The room went silent. Commander Zal walked forward slowly. No human has reflexes that fast, he said. Who are you really? Jia from Earth Colony TR7. Blood dripped from Jia's hand onto the floor. She looked at Han and Da, then at Commander Zal. I told you, she said quietly. I'm just here to learn. Take her to Administrator Kelnar, Commander Zal ordered 2 security guards. Now. As they led Jia away, her pendant glowed softly under her shirt. No one noticed except Han. We have to help her, Han whispered to Da. How? Da asked. And why? We don't even know who she really is. Han held up the data chip. To find out the truth. About her, about Earth, about what really happened 200 years ago. In Administrator Kellner's office, Jia sat very still. Her cut hand was wrapped in a bandage. Her face showed no emotion. We've been watching you, Administrator Kellner said. No normal human can do what you just did. So I'll ask once, what are you hiding, Jia? I'm waiting for an answer, Administrator Kellner said. His orange face looked hard and cold. Jia looked at her bandaged hand. I grew up in a tough colony. We had to learn to protect ourselves. Your reflexes are not human, Commander Zal said. I've fought in 3 wars. I know what's possible and what's not. Jia said nothing. Fine, Administrator Kellner said. Until we learn the truth, you will be watched. Security drones will follow you everywhere. If you try to leave the academy, you will be stopped. Later, Jia sat alone in her room. A small security drone hovered outside her window. Another waited in the hall. There was a soft knock at her door. She opened it a crack. It was Talia, her roommate. "Can I come in?" Talia asked. Her blue skin glowed softly. Gia stepped back, surprised. Talia had never wanted to talk before. "Everyone's talking about what happened," Talia said. "How you saved Laya." "I just reacted," Gia said. Talia looked at her closely. "No one moves that fast, especially not humans." She paused. "I want to help you." "Why?" Gia asked. "Because saving Laya was brave. And because I've been unfair to you." Talia looked down. "My family died in a space accident near an Earth colony. I blamed all humans. That was wrong." Gia didn't know what to say. She had never expected kindness from Talia. Meanwhile, Han and Da met in the library. They sat in a corner where no one could hear them. "I found something else on the data chip," Han said. He showed Da his tablet. "It talks about the Seven." "The Seven?" Da asked. "7 human warriors who fought the Void Armada's best fighters. And one," Han pointed to a blurry picture. "Look at this symbol. It's on their armor." The symbol was a circle with 7 stars. "I've seen that before," Da said suddenly. "On Ja's pendant." Han nodded. "And there's more. Last week, I found a rare plant from a dead world. It had this same symbol carved on its seed pod." "What does it mean?" Da asked. "I don't know yet," Han said. "But we need to talk to Ja." That night, something strange happened. A student named Mira from the Mindari species tried to read Ja's mind while she slept. The Mindari could read thoughts by touching someone's head. Mira touched Ja's forehead lightly. Then she screamed and fell back. The scream woke Gia and Talia. They found Mira on the floor, shaking. "What happened?" Talia asked, helping Mira sit up. "Fire," Mira whispered. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Fire in her blood. The daughter of thunder. She comes from the 7 stars." Security guards took Mira to the medical bay. She kept saying the same words over and over. "What was she talking about?" Talia asked Gia. Gia's hand went to her pendant, hidden under her shirt. "I don't know." But her eyes told a different story. Far above the academy, in space, a ship appeared. It was black and shaped like a claw. It moved silently, with no lights. Its sensors scanned the planet below, searching for something. The next morning, Administrator Kellner called an emergency meeting with Commander Zoll and Professor Vrex. "We have a problem," he said. "The incident with the Mindari student has caught attention off-world. I received a message from the Galactic Council. They want to know about the human girl." "Why would the Council care about one human?" Professor Vrex asked. "I don't know," Administrator Kellner said. "But they're sending a representative. They'll be here in 3 days." In the garden, Day tended the blue flowers from Talax. He looked up at Joe's window. A security drone still hovered there. "We're running out of time," Han said, appearing beside him. "For what?" Day asked. "To find out who Ja really is," Han said, "and why everyone suddenly wants to know about her." Above them, the sky darkened as storm clouds gathered. And somewhere in that sky, the black ship waited. For 2 days, Gia tried to live normally while security drones followed her everywhere. Students whispered when she walked by. Some looked scared. Others looked curious. "The combat tournament starts tomorrow," Talia said as they ate lunch. She had started sitting with Ja, even though her friends didn't like it. The combat tournament was a big event at the academy. All students had to join. The best fighters from each class would compete. "I won't be fighting," Gia said. "Commander Zoll won't let me." Just then, Professor Vrex walked up to their table. His 6 eyes blinked at Ja. "You will participate in the tournament," he said. "Administrator Kellner's orders." "But why?" Gia asked. "I'm not a good fighter." Professor Vrex made a sound like a laugh. "Really? After what we saw in training." He leaned closer. "Be at the arena tomorrow. or I will find a reason to expel you for academic cheating." After he left, Talia looked worried. "They're trying to force you to show your abilities again." "I know," Jia said quietly. That night, Han and Dai sneaked past the security drones to meet Jia in the garden. They sat behind some tall plants where no one could see them. "We know about the 7, Han said. "And we know your pendant has their symbol." Jia looked at them for a long moment. Then she pulled out her pendant. In the moonlight, the strange metal glowed softly. "This belonged to my ancestor," she said. "His name was Jin. He was one of the 7. "So the stories are true," Dai said. "Humans did defeat the Void Armada." "Just barely," Jia said. "The 7 gave their lives to stop them." "But what does that have to do with you?" Han asked. Before Jia could answer, alarms sounded across the academy. A voice came over the speakers. "All students to their rooms. This is not a drill. All students to their rooms immediately." They ran back to the main building. In the sky above, storm clouds flashed with lightning. But it wasn't a natural storm. "Something's up there," Han said, looking at the clouds. "Something big." The next morning, the tournament began despite the strange storm. The arena was full of students and teachers. Jia's first fight was against Krell, the same Drakner student from training class. "I won't go easy on you this time, human," Krell said as they faced each other on the fighting platform. Commander Zal stood nearby, watching closely. Administrator Kellner sat in the front row with Professor Vrex. "Begin," called the referee. Krell attacked fast. Jia blocked his first punch, then his second. She moved like she had been taught in class. Slow, careful, human. "You're hiding again," Krell said quietly so only she could hear. "Show us what you really are." Jia said nothing. She kept blocking, kept moving back. Krell grew angry. "Your kind should have been wiped out with the rest of Earth," he said. "When the Void Armada returns, they'll finish the job. The remaining human colonies will be easy to destroy, like killing pests." Something changed in Jia's eyes. Her pendant grew hot under her shirt. She stopped moving back. When Krell attacked again, everything changed. Jia moved like water, like lightning. Her hands struck faster than eyes could follow. Her feet barely touched the ground. She spun around Krell, hit him 3 times, and flipped him over her shoulder. Krell hit the mat hard. The arena went silent. Jia stood very still, breathing fast. She looked at her hands like she didn't recognize them. "Detain her," Administrator Kellner ordered the security guards. 5 guards approached Jia. The crowd began to push and shove, trying to see what was happening. "Jia," Han called, pushing through the crowd with Da. Jia looked at them, then at the approaching guards. Her hand went to her pendant. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The pendant flashed with bright light. All the lights in the arena went out. The security systems failed. In the darkness, people screamed and pushed. When the emergency lights came on, Jia was gone. "Find her," Administrator Kellner shouted. Deep in the maintenance tunnels beneath the academy, Jia ran. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She turned, ready to fight. It was Han and Da. "We're coming with you," Han said. "You don't understand what's happening," Jia said. "Then tell us," Da said. "But tell us while we run." The maintenance tunnels under the academy were dark and cold. Water dripped from pipes overhead. Jia led the way, with Han and Da close behind. "Where are we going?" Han asked. "The archives," Jia said. "The real ones, not the ones students can access." They climbed down a ladder and walked through a narrow tunnel. Above them, alarms still rang. The academy was on lockdown. "How do you know about the secret archives?" Dai asked. "I've been exploring these tunnels at night," Jia said, when everyone was asleep. They reached a metal door with no handle. Jia took out her pendant and held it against the door. The metal glowed briefly, then the door slid open. Inside was a large room filled with old data storage units, The walls were lined with actual paper books. Real books were rare and valuable. Jia locked the door behind them. "We'll be safe here for a while." Han looked around in amazement. "I didn't know this place existed." "Few people do," Jia said. She sat down on a bench. "It's time I told you everything." Day and Han sat across from her. Jia held her pendant in her hands. "My real name is Jia Jin," she said. "Jin was my ancestor. He was the commander of the Seven, the Special Forces team that fought the Void Armada 200 years ago." "The ones who stopped them?" Han asked. Jia nodded. "Earth was losing the war. The Void Armada was too powerful. They had already destroyed half the planet. The Seven were Earth's last hope." "What did they do?" Dai asked. "They had special training. Special abilities." Jia looked down at her pendant. "This pendant contains Jin's memories, his knowledge, his skills." "That's not possible," Han said. "It's very old technology," Jia said. "From before the war. It stores not just data, but essence. It's been passed down in my family for generations." She held up the pendant. "When I wear it, I can access some of Jin's abilities. Not all at once. It happens slowly, over time. That's why I've been getting faster, stronger." "Is that why you came to the academy?" Dai asked. "To learn about your ancestor?" "No," Jia said. "I came because of this." She touched a control panel on the wall. A large screen lit up, showing a star map. Earth wasn't quarantined because of disease or danger, like the official story says. Jia explained. It was quarantined because the Galactic Council was afraid of humans. "Afraid? Of humans?" Han couldn't believe it. "We're one of the weakest species in the galaxy." "Not exactly," Jia said. She pressed another button. The screen showed old videos of the Seven fighting. They moved like Jia had in the tournament, but even faster. Stronger. "Humans were part of a very old experiment," Jia said. "Our DNA was altered long ago. Most of those changes are dormant, but the Seven found a way to wake them up. That's how they defeated the Void Armada. And the Council was afraid this could happen again," Dai said slowly. "So they cut off Earth from the rest of the galaxy." Jia nodded. "They told everyone that Earth was dangerous, that humans were primitive. They rewrote history." Han pointed at the pendant. "And that contains the truth." "Yes, and more." Jia's voice was quiet now. "The Void Armada wasn't completely destroyed. Some ships escaped. They'd been hiding, rebuilding, and now they're back." "The ship in orbit," Dai said. "The strange storm. They've been looking for Jin's descendants for 200 years, Jia said. "For revenge. And for this." She held up the pendant. "What's so special about it?" Han asked. "It doesn't just contain memories," Jia said. "It contains the key to unlocking human potential, and it contains coordinates." "To what?" Dai asked. "To Earth," Jia said. "The real Earth, not the empty quarantine zone they show on official maps, and to other human colonies that the Council doesn't know about, where the rest of the Seven's descendants live." Suddenly, the lights in the archive room flashed red. A voice came over the speaker system. "Attention all Academy personnel. An unidentified ship has entered orbit. All students to emergency shelters immediately." Jia stood up. "They're here." The whole Academy shook. Dust fell from the ceiling of the archive room. "They're attacking," Han said. Jia shook her head. "Not attacking. Landing." The three friends ran back through the tunnels, climbing up to the main level of the academy. When they reached a window, they stopped and looked out. A huge black ship shaped like a claw had landed in the main courtyard. It was bigger than the academy's largest building. Around it, the air seemed darker, like it sucked in the light. "We need to find Administrator Kellner," Dai said. "He needs to know what's happening." They ran toward the administration building. Students and teachers were running everywhere. Some were crying. Others were trying to reach the emergency shelters. In the main hall, They found Administrator Kellner with Commander Zoll and Professor Vrex. They were looking at security screens. "You," Administrator Kellner pointed at Jia when he saw her. "This is your doing." "I can explain," Jia said. "But first you need to evacuate everyone. Those are void ships out there." "Impossible," Professor Vrex said. "The Void Armada was destroyed 200 years ago." "Not all of them," Jia said. Before she could say more, the main doors of the hall opened. A group of tall aliens walked in. They had gray skin and 4 eyes set in faces that looked like they were made of stone. They wore black armor that seemed to move like liquid. At their head was a larger alien with red marks on his face. He looked around the hall, then his eyes fixed on Jia. "At last," he said. His voice was deep and cold. "The last descendant of Jinn." Security guards moved to block the aliens, but the leader waved his hand. The guards flew across the room like they were made of paper. "Who are you?" Administrator Kellner demanded. "I am Supreme Commander Nixor of the Void Armada." The alien said, "We have come for the human girl and the artifact she carries." "What do you want with her?" Commander Zoll asked, stepping forward. Nixor looked at him. "She carries the key, the last piece of the puzzle." "What puzzle?" Jia asked. Nixor smiled, showing sharp teeth. "The truth about your species, about what you really are." "We know about the 7, Han said, "about how they defeated you." "Defeated us?" Nixor laughed. "Is that what you think happened?" He walked toward Jia. "Your kind were not simple humans who found special powers. You were weapons." "Weapons?" Jia didn't understand. "Created long ago for a war even older than ours," Nixor said. "Your DNA was designed for combat, for killing. The 7 didn't discover this by accident. They were the final test of the program." No one spoke. Jia felt cold all over. "When they defeated our elite forces, the experiment was deemed a success," Nixor continued. "But then something unexpected happened. Your ancestors turned on their creators. They refused to be weapons anymore." "Who created us?" Jia asked. "The ones you now call the Galactic Council," Nixor said. Administrator Kellner shook his head. "This is nonsense. Lies." "Is it?" Nixor turned to him. "Then why did they quarantine Earth? Why do they spread lies about humans being primitive? They fear what they created, and they should." He turned back to Jia. "Your pendant contains the full genetic key. With it, I can awaken the warrior genes in all humans, create an army that no one can stand against." "And then what?" Jia asked. "Then we finish what we started 200 years ago," Nixor said. "We take control of the galaxy, with humans as our frontline soldiers." "I'll never help you," Jia said. Nixor smiled again. "You won't have a choice." He nodded to his soldiers. They grabbed Han, holding a weapon to his head. "The pendant," Nixor said, holding out his hand. "Or your friend dies." Jia looked at Han, then at Da, then at her pendant. "Don't," Han said. "Whatever happens to me, don't give it to him." The pendant grew warm in Jia's hand, then hot. It began to glow, brighter and brighter. "What is happening?" Nixor asked, stepping back. "The genetic transfer," Jia said. Her eyes began to glow with the same light as the pendant. "It's complete." Light filled the hall. Everyone stepped back from Jia except Nixor. Her eyes glowed like small suns. Her skin seemed to shine from within. "Release my friend," Jia said. Her voice sounded different, deeper, like many voices speaking together. "Give me the pendant first," Nixor said, but his soldiers looked scared. "I don't need to," Jia said. "It's part of me now. The knowledge, the skills, the memories, all of it." She raised her hand. The soldiers holding Han were pushed back by an invisible force. Han ran to Da. "Get everyone out," Jia told them. "Now." Day nodded. He and Han began helping students and teachers leave the hall. "Commander Zal," Dai called. "We need your help evacuating." Commander Zal looked at Ja, then at Dai. He made a decision. "All Academy personnel, follow me," he ordered. "Move to the emergency shelters." Nixer didn't try to stop them. His eyes were fixed on Ja. "You think you can fight us alone?" he asked. "Not alone," Ja said. The light around her took shape. 7 glowing figures stood with her. They looked like warriors in ancient armor. Each one's face was both strange and familiar. "The 7, Administrator Kilmar whispered as he backed away. "Impossible," Nixer said. "They died centuries ago." "Their bodies died," Gia said. "Their essence lived on, passed down through blood and memory." "It doesn't matter," Nixer said. "You are still just one human girl." He attacked. He was fast, but Gia was faster. She moved like she had 7 bodies, not one. Every strike Nixer made hit only air. Gia fought back. Her movements were perfect. Each punch, each kick was exactly where it needed to be. Nixer fell back. He pulled out a weapon. It looked like a small black box. "Enough games," he said. The box opened. Inside was darkness deeper than night. "A void bomb," Professor Vrex said from the doorway. "It will destroy everything." Nixer smiled. "If I can't have the genetic key, no one will." He pressed a button on the box. It began to hum. "Everyone get back," Ja shouted. The 7 light figures moved closer to her. They seemed to melt into her body. Ja's glow grew brighter. She reached for the void bomb. Light poured from her hands, surrounding the dark box. "What are you doing?" Nixer screamed. "What Jinn did 200 years ago," Gia said. "Containing the darkness." The bomb hummed louder. The darkness from it fought against Ja's light. She fell to one knee, still holding the bomb. "It's too powerful," Han said from the doorway. "She can't hold it." "She's not trying to hold it," Day realized. "She's trying to absorb it." Ja's body was shaking now. Sweat ran down her face. The light around her flickered. "I can't," she whispered. Then she felt hands on her shoulders. Talia stood behind her. "You're not alone," Talia said. More students came forward. Each one placed a hand on Ja or on someone touching her. A chain of contact formed, reaching all the way to the door. "What is this?" Nixar asked. "Unity," Gia said. New strength flowed into her, something you will never understand. With a final push of power, Gia forced all the darkness into the pendant. It turned black for a moment, then flashed with blinding light. The explosion was contained. When the light faded, Nixer and his soldiers lay unconscious on the floor. The pendant hung around Ja's neck, looking normal again. Gia stood up slowly. She looked different somehow. Older, wiser. "It's over," she said. But it wasn't quite over. 3 days later, ships from the Galactic Council arrived. They wanted to take Ja away, to study her, to contain the human threat. But something unexpected happened. The entire academy stood with her. Students, teachers, even Administrator Kelmar and Professor Vrex. "She saved us all," Professor Vrex said to the council representatives. "And she has shown us that the stories we were told about humans were lies." The council had no choice. They agreed to end Earth's quarantine, to allow humans to rejoin galactic society. 1 month later, Gia stood in the garden with Han and Dai. Her pendant hung openly around her neck now. No more hiding. "What will you do now?" Han asked. Gia looked up at the stars. "There are more of us out there, more descendants of the 7. They need to know the truth." "When do we leave?" Dai asked. Gia smiled. "As soon as we finish this semester. I still have exams to pass, after all."